All right, today we're going to look at finding the radians. Now we're going to be working backwards from where we were talking about before. So we're going to take the unit circle over here. Going around our unit circle with our coordinates, we have 1, 0. At 45 degrees, that's the square root of 2 over 2. The square root of 2 over 2. At 90 degrees, we're at 0, 1. And we're just going to talk about the first quadrant in our lesson today. Now, well, remember that's 0 degrees and 0 radians. This would be 45 degrees and pi over 4 radians, 90 degrees and pi over 2 radians. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is working backwards. So before we work backwards, let's just go over our sine and cosine values and our other 4 trig functions at the different angles. Here we're just going to practice with 45 first. So at 45 degrees, or that can be written as pi over 4 radians, it's the same spot on the unit circle. Now, if we take the sine of pi over 4, well, the sine over pi over 4, remember back to the unit circle, it's cosine and sine values. So our sine at pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. Our cosine at pi over 4 is also the square root of 2 over 2. Now what we're going to find is our other trig functions here as well. Our next one we're going to find is the tangent at pi over 4. Well, that's going to be the sine of pi over 4 divided by the cosine of pi over 4. Well, that's going to be the square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2. Anything that's the same on the top and bottom being divided is always going to give you 1. Now, if we talk about the cosecant at pi over 4, well, we can write that as 1 over the sine of pi over 4. So pi over 4, the sine value there is the square root of 2 over 2. So we have to do 1 times 2 over the square root of 2, which is going to give us 2 over the square root of 2. In this class, we need to rationalize that. So 2 over the square root of 2, we need to multiply the top and the bottom by our square root. So we get 2 square roots over 2 with our 2's canceling out. So we're just left with the square root of 2. Now, our secant at pi over 4 is going to be 1 over the cosine at pi over 4. So that's 1 over the square root of 2 over 2. Now, we just did that math work up above, so we know we should get an answer of the square root of 2. Now, our last one is our cotangent at pi over 4. So our cotangent is going to be the cosine of pi over 4 divided by the sine of pi over 4, which is going to be the square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2, which is going to give us 1 again. Well, that's all 6 values. Now, to help us out, I'm just going to go through here and circle them so that while you're watching this, you can see all the values very easily. Now, let's go through and figure out the 30 degrees and the 60 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here, and I'm going to plug in our 30 degrees, which is pi over 6, which is the square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. We just worked out the 45, so I'm going to skip that one and go to 60 degrees, which is pi over 3, which is 1/2 the square root of 3 over 2. Now I'm going to take my camera here, and I'm going to take a picture of this part, and it's going to take us to a new slide. Now this new slide, I'm going to work out our values here. So what I'm going to want to find is my cosine, my sine, my secant, my cosecant, the tangent, and the cotangent at each one of these points. And the first one we're going to start out is at 30 degrees at pi over 6. Now the cosine, remember our values are cosine, sine inside the parentheses. So the cosine is the square root of 3 over 2. The sine value is 1/2. Now the secant, remember the secant is 1 over cosine. So what we're going to do is take 1 divided by our cosine value. Our cosine value is the square root of 3 over 2. So we need to flip over our fraction, so we get 2 over the square root of 3. Rationalizing with the square root of 3 and the square root of 3, we get 2 square roots of 3 divided by 3. Now our cosecant is 1 over sine, so that's going to be 1 divided by 1/2. So that's going to give us a value of 2. Now remember, tangent is sine divided by cosine, so our sine value is 1/2 divided by the square root of 3 over 2. Copy, change the multiplication, flip our second fraction. Now here, our 2's will cancel out and we get 1 over the square root of 3, which is going to be the square root of 3 over 3. Cotangent is the cosine over the sine, so we're going to get the square root of 3 divided by 2 divided by 1/2. So here we're going to have the square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. Our 2's will cancel and we're left with the square root of 3. So that gives us all of our values there at 30 degrees and pi over 6. Now let's do the same thing at 60 degrees. So we have the cosine, the sine, the secant, the cosecant, the tangent, and the cotangent. Now here we're going to have our cosine is 1/2 and our sine is the square root of 3 over 2. Now secant doesn't change, it's still 1 over cosine. So here we're going to have 1 divided by 1/2, which is going to give us 2. Our cosecant is going to be 1 over sine, which the sine value, remember it's cosine sine, so our sine value is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. Now if you look here, we've taken 1 over the square root of 3 over 2. We did that down here. Well, what was our answer? Our answer was the 2 square roots of 3 all over 3. Going backwards just for a second, we can see that when we worked out our secant up here, 1 over 1/2, we worked that out down here and got 2 as well, which we got 2 up top. Now, let's keep going through tangent and cotangent, and then I'll go over why that happens. So the tangent is going to be sine, which the sine value is the square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. Well, did we work this out down below? We sure did. Down here at the cotangent spot, which gave us the square root of 3. So up here we're going to get the square root of 3. Well, the cotangent is going to be cosine, which is 1/2, divided by sine, which is the square root of 3 over 2. We also worked that out on the previous problem down below and got an answer of the square root of 3 over 3. Now, why did this happen? Well, if we look back, our cosine value is our sine value in a different spot for 30 and 60. Our sine and our cosine switches spots. So yes, some of our numbers and values will just switch. Now we go through all this work so that we can work out our problems today. Now our problems today will say, what if I want to take the sine inverse of 1/2? And we're going to talk about this being in quadrant 1. Well, where is the sine value 1/2? What we want here is a radian answer. So what radian do we get at the sine of 1/2? Well, let's go back and look. The sine value of 1/2. The sine value of 1/2. Well, that was at our radian value of pi over 6. So our answer is pi over 6. Now, this isn't any new material. We went over this in years past. The problems looked like this when we did it in years past. We would have 8 and 12, and we would say, find the angle there. Well, this is the opposite side, the hypotenuse. So we would have the sine of x would equal our ratio of sides of 8 over 12. Well, to find our angle measure, we would take the sine inverse of 8 divided by 12, and that would give us our angle. Well, if you notice, we have that inverse here. We have the inverse up here. Our radian also could go with an angle measure of 30 degrees. So it's all related back to what we've done before. Well, let's take another example. What if we want the secant of -1 is 2? Well, let's look back. Where is the secant 2? Well, the secant is 2 right here. Well, what does that go with? That goes with 60 degrees and pi over 3. So we would have pi over 3 for our radian, and we would have 60 degrees for our degree. So those are the problems that we want to work out and we want to go through. The next lesson tomorrow, we'll take this and we'll find the tangents, the cotangents, and the other angles with stuff inside.